Welcome, everyone. My name is Devet. You say it like where you take your dog if your dog got sick. Last year at work, we had a plan and needed to onboard a new team to build something onto our existing Rails monolith. And it would make most sense for it to just go in there and be done in Rails. So our wonderful recruiting team, they work in-house for SalesLoft, talk to them, they're nice folks. They found us some people that had Rails experience. And so after everybody was hired and the team was formed, they worked with us for a bit, just until they got all the team members, everything was set, then the plan changed. That they're going to be building a brand new service, and it would make sense for that to be done in Elixir. So now we had a whole group of people. From the business side, the assumption was, oh, they're just going to onboard and be ready to go because they already have experience with this. From their perspective, they thought, well, I've got Rails experience. I'm taking this new position. I'll be working in Rails. This is going to be great. I get to be adding to my years of Rails experience, and the company's going to be thrilled because I'm going to be productive right away because I've done this before. And yeah, then the plan changed. So the main thing I want you to consider, and I guess this talk is aimed at you, if you are in some position responsible to help people new to Elixir onboard and get productive and start writing code and delivering. And this talk is more aimed at if they are mid-level or senior, that they have some experience with another language. The talk after this one is aimed at if they are junior, and that's a whole different ball of wax, that mentorship process. So I'm staying for that talk. But yeah, so if that's you, then the talk's aimed at you. So the first thing I want to say, and this might be really the only thing you need to walk away with, is don't assume that they are Elixir enthusiasts. Okay, trying a new HDMI cable, thanks so much. Don't assume that they're Elixir enthusiasts. And throughout my talk, this is going to pop up again and apply in different situations of different things you need to consider because of this. And the reason why I feel the need to say this is because if you're at ElixirConf or you're in that position of technical leadership, you probably have been doing Elixir for a while, and maybe when you started doing Elixir, you started doing it because you were enthusiastic about it. You, at some point, took some of your nights and weekends or early mornings and learned some Elixir on your own time. And that's great, but you can't expect that of other people. That can't be the assumption. I've said it to many people at work. It is okay to pick up a book or a video course and read it or watch it during work hours. It's more awkward in the office, but then you got to say it even more because that has to happen. It should only be expected that people put in 40 hours, maybe a little bit more, but after they've put in their work, they need to get to the more important things of spending time with their family, practicing their faith, practicing a hobby. And if for you, if that hobby is doing some programming thing, great, but it is more fun when it's a hobby. When you're learning some, you know they're about to use some new technology at work, and then during the weekend or in the evening, you're learning it or getting ahead to be the expert on it when the time comes. There's a fun aspect of that, right? There's knowing that, okay, leadership is going to be so impressed. I'm going to provide so much value to the business because I'm putting in this extra time and I'm enjoying this. If it was expected of me, it was like, yeah, this is just table stakes to have the job, that would suck all the joy out of it. So yeah, don't assume that they're thrilled to have the opportunity to work in Elixir. So if you don't assume, you can do this amazing thing is you can ask. And this is how I've phrased the question. I've asked it, I probably haven't asked it enough, is to just, as people are onboarding, ask them, hey, where are you at on the scale of, on the one end, man, this is frustrating. I feel like it's going slow. I could have done this so much faster in language X where I have my experience. Or on the other end of the scale, this is incredible. I can't believe Elixir is going so well for me. I like all the tools I get to use. Where are you on that scale? And just have the conversation so you can hear where they are and, even if you don't respond with any guidance or change to the process, just letting people feel heard is so powerful. So help them see the benefits. Now, if you're trying to help a CTO or a business leader see the benefits of Elixir, that's a whole different talk. You're in the wrong room. But from one nerd to another, there are some things that we care about that we could get excited about. And also, this list I've got here might be more aimed at mid-level to senior people that have spent some time in another language and have run into some challenges in production. They've gotten into some hard problems. Concurrent tests. We like our tests to run fast and give us that fast feedback loop. Server response times. Again, in many situations, the business does not care if the server response time is 100 milliseconds or 1 millisecond. Rails would never have existed if that was like important all the time. But from one nerd to another, fast server response times, sub-millisecond response times is really cool, and we like to be excited about that. Making a web request inside of a web request. This is a whole class of problem that there's actually a short list of runtimes that can do it well. Where, if a request is going to come in and we need to respond within a millisecond, many languages could do that. But if a request is going to come in and while we're serving that request, the Phoenix server needs to make another third-party API call or do some IO-intensive thing. And so this response is going to take 500 milliseconds or more, no matter what you do, because of other things. Elixir is uniquely powerful at holding on to those. And if 10,000 of those come in, Elixir can hold on to all 10,000 of them in one server and respond to them when they're ready. Having most of Redis and a tiny bit of Kafka at your fingertips without any external dependencies, this is something that you can get people excited about. I talked to somebody on Monday that works at a small company where the technical leadership is deep into the database world and not really involved in the code. And for them to get a new technology or data store approved is really difficult there. So if they had to go to leadership and say, hey, we want to cache something, can we spin up a new Redis server and then maintain this thing forever? There would be a lot of pushback. But since Elixir is already approved and in the door, they've got all these tools they can just reach for from within the beam. Processes have their own garbage collection. If somebody comes from a JVM background, they've seen concurrent programming. They've seen doing multi-threaded stuff, using all the CPU cores, but when it's time for garbage collection, everything needs to pause until garbage collection is done, and then things can continue. Where in Elixir, each process does its own garbage collection, so you're not going to get those freezing the whole world issues. And one process trying to use 100% of a CPU core doesn't really slow other things down. This one doesn't make sense at first, but if you get into the Beam scheduler with somebody, it's really special how this is done. And if they are that mid-level to senior person, pointing them to Sasha Urich's talk on the soul of Erlang and Elixir, we'll get into a lot of these unique benefits that Elixir on the Beam provides. And productivity is the one that should be a sell to everybody. You're going to be productive. Whether they are junior or senior or a business stakeholder, Elixir helps us be productive, which is super, super important. relate concepts to languages they're already familiar with. I'll give a few examples. That a module serves the same code organization use case as a class. Or an object-oriented user object in OO land would have had state and behavior, would have had some methods you can use to interact with that. And in Elixir, there would be a user struct that is just data, that has no behavior, just data. And it might live in the same module as some functions that might transform that data or write it to a database or read it from or transform it from JSON or whatever. But even if the definition lives in the same file, the two concepts are distinct, the state and the behavior. And one important thing is that a gen server is not a code organization tool. A gen server does have state and behavior, but only use it when you cannot achieve something with pure functions. So acknowledge the gotchas. If you are traveling all the way to ElixirConf, you might be an Elixir enthusiast. And so if everything that ever comes out of your mouth is positive, of like, oh yeah, Elixir is so great at this, it's so great at that, it's better than any other language for any use case you could imagine, then the listener needs to start filtering in their head and wondering, okay, which things are really good, or which things are you just saying Elixir is good at because you're such a fan? Or what are you not saying? Okay, what are the gotchas? What are Elixir not good at? So just speak up. If something comes up that Elixir is not good at, address it right away. One is config. Config, okay, I think config in Elixir is really great, but because it was solved in a different way than what it's done in other languages, it trips people up. And you're going to have to provide some pairing time and some PR review to help people know, especially the several config files, which files should things go in and when. And the very next point is going to touch on that. If this is your first compiled language, then you're going to get some really nice benefits, but also there are going to be some downsides, things that you just didn't have to think about before. For example, if you read an environment variable in your prod.exs config file, that's going to be read on whatever machine compiles the binary. And so you're going to compile that binary somewhere, and the environment variable will be read from there. It'll be hard-coded into the binary, and then you'll ship it to production. And worst case catastrophic scenario is that the production server could connect to the wrong database or something. It could be really bad. So keep an eye on those things, and that's why you're going to provide those PR reviews for config changes. And char lists are weird and confusing. Put double quotes on your strings. This list is not exhaustive, but just an example of a few things where acknowledge the gotchas and the sharp edges. Things to set up before they even start. So identify the experienced Elixir engineer that's going to help them when they get stuck, or that's going to provide their PR reviews or guide them along the way. You kind of have to have this. Or if you're thinking of three attributes of quality software: correctness, speed to delivery, and quality. You could correctness, speed delivery, and cost. You could only pick two, and you've got to choose correctness. If the software's not going to be correct, why even bother, right? So you got to choose. You want to deliver this fast, or you want it to cost less. If you don't want to hire an experienced Elixir engineer, you could spend time and have them first build a prototype that doesn't matter, or build the thing first as a prototype, maybe even with no tests, delete it completely, forget it, and write it again, test first. It's going to take some time, or you could hire an Elixir. There are many companies here, advertising services, and if you've got your own engineers, I don't mean outsource the writing of the code. I mean get an expert to come give PR review and some pairing, just to get people started and on the right track. Ideally, let them work on a small part of something that's already in production. If it's a new thing, get it deployed before they start, or pair with them until it's deployed. Asking them to learn a brand new language and runtime, maybe paradigm, and also figure out how to deploy things in your environment is not ideal. If any higher level OTP tools need to be used, like gen servers, ETS, Phoenix PubSub, things like that, write it down for them. Make the choice for them and write it down for them. So normally, if you're going to hire an experienced person, you don't want to get too detailed with them. You don't want to get down to the name of the modules and the name of the functions with them, because you've hired them to make those decisions. That's why you're paying them the big bucks based on their experience, that they're going to do that. But these concepts are new to them. OTP concepts doesn't exist in other languages. So you might spell it out for them. Like, okay, for this piece of work, you're going to create a gen server, and it's going to use the credentials and get a token. And right before that token expires, the gen server will call out and get a new token, refresh it. So, and the outside interface of this gen server will be this. It'll just be token.read or something, token.get, and yeah. So spell out for them in a bit more detail the first time they're going to use the OTP concepts. And ideally, pair with them on it if the time's available. Help choose libraries in the beginning. So what do you look for in HexPM? You don't want to have somebody in a position where they spent a lot of time and effort to get something to work, and then when it comes to PR review, you tell them, oh, sorry, you're going to have to rework this. We want to use the other CSV library because it has more recent commits on GitHub, or more GitHub stars, or more downloads on HexPM. Help guide them with that, empower them to make those decisions in the future. But yeah, set them up for success. Things to set up before they even start. Document how to get into a production console. So if you've been doing it for a while, it's very easy to just remember. You find the binary in production, you execute it, it pops out a bunch of help stuff, and then you'll find the right command to run there. But to a new person, they're learning too many new things all at once to also remember that. Just throw this in the README, and they can go from there. Things to run in CI. Mixed test, mixed format, mixed credo, mixed hex audit. The first one you probably were going to do anyways. The last one is kind of an extra if they happen to copy paste some code from a really old blog post or Stack Overflow with a library name and version number in there. Hopefully mixed hex audit will scream at them and say, hey, this thing's old, it's not maintained. But the two in the middle is really where the juice is here. That mixed format, and especially mixed credo, can really elevate your PR review process. That instead of you, during that PR review, getting into the formatting or the linting with them, that the tools can help them do that correctly, and you can operate with them at a higher level. Mixed credo -- explain is huge. Sometimes credo will complain, and it won't be clear why, or why is it complaining? What do I need to do to make it happy? Mixed credo -- explain. It gives a plain English description of why it needs to be changed with a code example of how it will be changed. It works every time. So things they can ignore in the beginning. I'm not going to read the whole list. The list is not even exhaustive. I've heard new things even this week at ElixirConf about things I could throw on this list, new things the Beam can do. Again, if you learned Elixir as an enthusiast, you might have seen, ooh, there are all these different tools. This is kind of fun. I get to learn a new thing, and it'll give me a new idea that I could take back to my day job, where that's fun. But if somebody is just trying to do their job, seeing all these brand new tools with new concepts they've never heard of is overwhelming. And for most of the work out there that you're going to be asking people to do, they don't need to do these things. An experienced person can be implementing these and providing a good interface for others to use. Things they need to start right away. I'll have some learning resources, suggestions later. But here are some things that might not be in there. Just read all the errors carefully with the attitude that I'm going to understand these. Elixir errors are great. And yeah, in any language, you've got to understand the error messages. How to create a module with the naming conventions, especially at your company, there might be certain naming conventions for creating modules or which folder they should go in. Named functions, anonymous functions, more things they need to start right away. How you call named functions, it's always on the module. You don't do devet.upcase, you do string.upcase devet. If they come from OO, it's as if everything is a class method. How to use the list, map, string, and enum modules. The documentation is amazing. They could just read that and know where to find it, get in there. Pattern match on function heads instead of using if statements. This is not a good candidate for a group decision with newcomers. Let me explain. You want to give people autonomy, mastery, and purpose to keep them engaged at work and have them delivering their best work. But sometimes you need to eat into some of that autonomy, and here's one of those cases where if you let them choose, if they're new to Elixir or new to languages with pattern matching, they're going to believe the if statement is more readable. And so they're going to choose that, well, in our team, we do if statements. And the problem is going to come when they try to read the code from other Elixirists, where I've never seen an else out in the wild, ever, in Elixir. And ifs are rare. So yeah, instead of just coming top down, just have a conversation about it and acknowledge that, hey, I can acknowledge that an if statement would be easier for you to read. But I need you to take my word on this, that when you pattern match on function heads and you're trying to understand a bit of code, you're looking at that function, it's got an empty line above it, it's got an empty line under it, and right in the function head, there's a nice declarative explanation of what is the case in which this function will execute. And just believe me, it's going to seem very readable to you. And so, yeah, you're just going to have to ask them to do it this way, even though they might be more comfortable with if-else. How to create structs and pattern match on them. Especially, you could pattern match on a struct without, matching on any of the keys. Writing tests with XUnit should go without saying. Coding style with newcomers in mind. So, excuse me. There's an optimal size to break your work into. Not too small, not too big. But when somebody is new to what they're doing, break it down smaller, it will be more efficient. So maybe for QA or for testing or for what we're actually delivering that we can say we've done something purposes, these work items might actually be too small. But it's for PR review, because you don't want somebody to really struggle in a new language, spend a whole bunch of time, the better part of a week, maybe more, writing 400 lines of code among many files, and now you want to come in with a really heavy PR review of, hey, let's change this, let's change that, let's change that. That's discouraging to them, because to them, if they're delivering a large chunk of work, they feel like they just crossed the finish line of a marathon, and now you're telling them, actually, that wasn't the finish. So, yeah, definitely do that. I don't know if I mentioned heavy PR reviews. When I say heavy, I mean helpful and good PR reviews that spend some time on them. Something I've done a fair bit is I might leave a whole bunch of comments, and then I'll message them saying, hey, I reviewed your PR, but if you want to hop on Slack, just throw time on my calendar, and we can go through it together. Plan to spend some time there. Create clean interfaces to the things they don't need to learn in the beginning. Things like gen servers. I kind of mentioned this earlier. But yeah, if they need to write the module name gen server while they're consuming and interacting with your gen server, you've got a leaky abstraction. Or if all the 6 different messages that they could send to the gen server, all the functions they're calling is a call, and they're sending in the exact data that you're going to pattern match on inside of your gen server, you've got a leaky abstraction. You want them to not know that, you want even an experienced Elixir engineer to be consuming and interacting with your gen server without knowing that it's a gen server. You just make a clean abstraction there. It's good code practice anyways. follow your own testing best practices very strictly. So when I'm new to a code base or a language or something, I'll go find an existing test that's working, copy paste it to another file, start renaming things, and sort of try to get things working from there. So however good the existing tests were, my copy is going to be a little bit worse in the beginning, and that's what's going to happen to your tests. So to really keep good hygiene there in the beginning, whatever your best practices are. Don't use recursion if a pipeline of enum functions will do. I'm not saying don't use recursion. Recursion is great. Don't use it if you don't need it. And this is not a technical talk, but here's my one code slide, or one of two. A brand new Elixir engineer would look at this and be totally confused. Maybe after about a week, they'll understand kind of what's going on. That ampersand shorthand syntax took a while to sink into my brain. It just took me a while to get it. But after about a week, they will be in love with the pipe symbol for the rest of their life. Any language they ever work in that doesn't have it, they will miss the pipe symbol. But then after a few months is when the problems might start, where they've had to use recursive functions a few times, and this is exactly what I did. I was like, oh, well, this is inefficient. We are iterating over the list. We're going over the list twice, processing the list twice. First, we go over the whole list to filter it to just integers. Then we again go over the remaining of the list to transform it, to double it. With a recursive function, I can do it all in one shot. And then I'd write code like this, which works, and it's elegant that Elixir can do it, but it's not more readable than the other one. So then after you haven't touched this code for 6 months, you might come back to it, and now you need to extend it or change it, and it's kind of, it just slows you down. Or something else I've run into is I've got a junior engineer pairing with me. We're making progress. We're going. We're knocking out work. And then we get to a recursive function. And now we need to make a call. OK, the recursive function doesn't make sense to them because they didn't have that in the language they've worked in. Do we slow down all of our progress and just work on recursive functions? Or do they just watch me code for a little bit while I, try and get past this bit? Neither feels great. Because it doesn't have to be done. If the recursive function has to be there, I'm getting a bit repetitive here, do it. But if you don't need it, change back to this. This is the previous slide. It's easier to read. It's clear what it's doing. People get it quicker. And it's very easy to debug and extend. OK, let's see. Learning resources not to start with. Programming Elixir by Dave Thomas and Elixir in Action by Sasha Jurek. I already recommended Sasha Jurek's talk. He's incredible. I've used some of his libraries. Dave Thomas's book, phenomenal. I really like it. I still need to read Sasha Jurek's book. Both these are excellent books. However, not for somebody that's just trying to get their job done. If somebody is new at a job, please tell me you'll never say this, that, hey, you need to succeed at Elixir if you want to succeed at this job, right? You'll never say this to them, but it is implied, and they're going to think it. So if you give them one of these books, on the back of Dave Thomas's book, it specifically said, there's like a speedometer that's all the way over to the right. It says expert. This book is for experts. If somebody picks that up and they think, oh, I need to understand this, to succeed at Elixir, it's overwhelming. And again, if you go back to my second slide, you might have learned Elixir in your free time as an enthusiast. And in that setting, oh, that's fun. Wow, look at all these different tools it has. Look at all these different things I can do. But if you're needing to learn Elixir to get the job done, starting with a smaller subset of, OK, these are the things I need to know to get the job done, is much less overwhelming, much more approachable. So here are the learning resources I would recommend. And my slides are on GitHub, or you can ping me and I can send them to you. Find me somehow. I'm on the Elixir Slack. There won't be another Devet, I promise. The elixirlang.org getting started, the first 15 sections are things that I believe everybody working in Elixir just needs to know. Learn functional programming with Elixir. Imagine Dave Thomas's book, but the speedometer is all the way on the left. It's a beginner book. And even for an experienced programmer, if they've been coding for many years in another language, they can just quickly go through it and get the gist of just what they need to start being productive at work. Then they can start picking up more advanced things. Pragmatic Studios, Elixir and OTP, I think it's about $70. SalesLoft has paid for many people to go through it. We've enjoyed it a lot. I've done it more than once. Great video series to get you going with Elixir. A lot of the little things like running recompile inside IEX, little things like that you might just not see if you're consuming the content in another way. And then learnelixir.dev, disclaimer, I have not tried this one at all, but there's a free preview, and whenever there's a free preview to a $4,200 thing, I don't know, that's intriguing to me. At some point, I probably would check it out or suggest somebody else checks it out. And if it does what it says on the box, then $4,200 would be a steal. So yeah. Now, for you, I want you to go and onboard people with excellence, and here's why. Is because for your own programming skills, you can keep getting better. You can keep learning, you can type faster, you can get more sleep, exercise, you can spend more of your free time with, solving coding exercises, you can run Mix New every weekend and build a new project, and you can deliver more, but you're scaling vertically, and there are diminishing returns, and you can only go so far. That at some point in your career, you've got to start scaling horizontally. And the mentorship you do of others and helping others get onboarded will have a bigger impact on the companies you work for and on your career than the code you can write yourself. And what I'm trying to say is the time you spend helping other people onboard is some of the most important work you will ever do. And so it is worth putting some thought into it, spending some time on it, preparing for it, and prioritizing it over you writing your own code when possible. Thank you very much.